This episode of the History Guy brought to you by Skillshare.
On November 17th, 1924, the editors of the New York Times published a scathing editorial about a disturbing trend that was sweeping the nation. Latest of the problems presented for solution to psychiatrists interested in the mental peculiarities of mobs and crowds they seethed is created by what is well called the craze over crossword puzzles. 111 years ago, what is generally considered to be the first crossword puzzle in history was published in the New York World, and 11 years after that, the New York Times published a series of stories and editorials about how the dastardly word boxes were destroying the very fabric of society. It is oddly ironic, as today the New York Times is known for its crossword puzzles, having produced tens of thousands of them. Now, you might find the little black and white boxes challenging, or you might find them annoying, or you might find them simply irrelevant. But the great crossword controversy deserves to be remembered. You know, it takes a lot of skills to survive and thrive in the modern economy. And in a world where skills count, Skillshare can help provide you with the skills that deserve to be remembered. You know, when I started making videos for YouTube, I pretty much had to just stumble around and figure out things for myself.
But today there's a better way. Whether you're looking to up your game or to switch your path, you should be on Skillshare. And thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this episode of the History Guy.
And the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1 month free trial, free, that's right, absolutely free, of Skillshare.
Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creators, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. For me, shorts are now the big thing on YouTube, and with my experience doing long form, I've been on Skillshare learning all that I can from experienced shorts creators about vertical formats and success in short form.
So whether it's for your career or for your passion or for your side hustle, Skillshare can help you take it to the next level. It's fun, it's engaging, and best of all, you get to control when and how it fits into your schedule.
And if you really want to master a skill, Skillshare has these great learning paths where you can follow class collections to master a skill from beginner to master.
And once again, the great people at Skillshare have something special just for the History Guy viewers. The first 500 people to sign up using my link in the description will get a 1 month free trial of Skillshare. So hurry up, become a member today.
To be fair, British born writer Arthur Wynne didn't invent the word puzzle when he created what he called a word cross for the New York World in 1913. The New York Times noted in December of 1924, although the crossword puzzle of the present itself is somewhat of a recent innovation, puzzles of the enigmatic kind, riddle acrostics, and other such entertaining mental teasers are as old as the written word. In fact, on November 24th, the Times had reported in the Archaeological Museum of Johns Hopkins University is a copy of what looks like the world's oldest crossword puzzle. The Times reports that the Phaistos disk dated to 2000 BC, and the puzzle itself had puzzled scientists. Discovered on the island of Crete in 1908, the terracotta disk is covered in symbols, and the script in which it is covered is still unknown today. But the Times wrote a century ago, the disk seems to have been intended originally as a die, and it is this interpretation which makes the ancient puzzle appear comparable to crossword matrices. While the disk is not like a true crossword puzzle, it doesn't have clues, and it's likely a syllabary or something similar, word games date at least to Roman times. The satyr or rotus square is a symbol of important iconography that contains a 5-letter Latin palindrome. While the square has for centuries been associated with Christianity, the earliest example, found in the ruins of Pompeii, suggests that it began as a Roman word puzzle. The square was so commonly used that author Adrian Raphael, author of Thinking Inside the Box, a history of the crossword, describes the square as the Kilroy was here of the Roman Empire. Over time, the square gained a mystical reputation that was supposedly able to confuse the devil himself. The square may have inspired numerous visual word games of the 19th century, while the idea of clues may have been derived from riddles, a practice that also goes back to ancient times and remained popular throughout history. But, Raphael writes, the crossword is a recent invention, born out of desperation. Editor Arthur Wynne at the New York World needed something to fill space in the Christmas edition of his paper's Fun Supplement, so he took advantage of new technology that could print black grids cheaply and created a diamond-shaped set of boxes, with clues to fill in the blanks, smack in the center of fun. Nearly overnight, the word cross puzzle went from space-filling ploy to the most popular feature of the page. It was Wynne who married elements together and created the key forms of the modern crossword puzzle, including the use of horizontal and vertical lines to create boxes, and eventually the use of black squares to separate words. While his original puzzle was called a word cross, a typesetting error later changed the name of the popular puzzle design to crossword. The name was usually spelled with a hyphen, cross dash word, and the combined crossword didn't come into use until the 1930s. While Wynn's idea slowly developed, it was its popularity with Richard Simon's Aunt Wixie that made it into a craze. The website Neatorama explains that Wixie was a New York World subscriber and crossword devotee. She asked her nephew, a recent graduate of Columbia University, if he could find a book of crossword puzzles for her daughter. Simon realized that no such book existed, but he and his friend Max Schuster decided to publish one. The book was, Neatorama explains, literally an overnight success. Smithsonian writes that throwing in a free pencil to sweeten the deal, the first crossword puzzle book, in untested and decidedly non literary format, worried the firm so much that the firm's name did not appear in the book, which had a small printing of 3,600 copies. The publisher needn't have been concerned. The book was an immediate success. The first run sold out quickly, and the company ran additional printings. The book eventually sold more than 100,000 copies and helped to make Simon and Schuster one of the nation's largest publishing houses. Crosswords suddenly became popular. Some thought too popular. The editors of the New York Times opined on November 17, 1924, scarcely recovered from the form of temporary badness that made so many pay enormous prices for mahjong sets. About the same person now are committing the same sinful waste in the utterly futile finding of words, the letters of which will fit into a prearranged pattern. The editors found no apparent value in down and across, complaining they get nothing out of it except a primitive sort of mental exercise, and success or failure in any given attempt is equally irrelevant to mental development. They argued that the claimed merit of sending puzzlers to the dictionary and so gaining an increased knowledge of its contents has little basis in fact, as the words are looked up for a single purpose. Nothing except their existence is discovered. Their opinion had not changed the following year, when on February 1st the editors opined, the almost universal hobby of the moment is the crossword puzzle. It is undertaken apparently by millions of people daily, and for no useful purpose whatsoever. That opinion was not universal. Miss Louise Sinclair wrote a letter to the editors regarding their puzzlephobic positions. Just why your topic of the Times writer should be elected to fulminate against the harmless crossword puzzle rather intrigues me, she complained. I cannot but believe that in this day of looking and listening of movies and radio, a sport which demands a little thinking should not be utterly despised. Furthermore, she opined, as a crossword puzzle leads not only to the dictionary, but to the Bible and encyclopedia as well, it at least refreshes the memory and serves as a checkup. But, her puzzlement aside, the Times was not alone in its complaint. On December 23rd, they reported that one Dr. D. L. Marsh, pastor of the Smithfield Street Methodist Church, declared in an address to his congregation that the working of crossword puzzles is the mark of a childish mentality. If anything, the news of the day suggested that puzzle obsession was a danger to language. In January of 1925, the Times reported that the question of whether or not the crossword puzzle book is literature seems to be answered by the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, where it is revealed that the library has no crossword puzzle books and does not intend to get any. Library officials told the Times it feels that the city's money should be spent on more serious purposes. The Times opined, the discovery sets forth the library is probably the only spot in Pittsburgh unconquered by the puzzle craze. The very dictionary itself was under threat. In December of 1924, the Times was forced to report that the Los Angeles Public Library was forced to put a 5-minute time limit on the use of the dictionary as a result of the abnormal popularity of dictionaries due to the crossword puzzle craze. The policy apparently caused some friction, as the Times was told. In the case of argument among those in the waiting line, parties are requested to please settle differences at the librarian's desk. The problem was, however, even worse across the pond. In February of 1925, the Times received news by wire that the damage caused to dictionaries in the public libraries in Wimbledon by people doing crossword puzzles has been so great that the Library Committee has withdrawn all volumes of lexicography from the reference library. Worse, the nefarious notebooks were destroying whole families. On December 11th, the Times reported that crosswords were the bane of the wives of Cleveland, Ohio. Homes in this city are now threatened by crossword puzzles. The innocent little white and black squares have fascinated so many husbands that legal egg organizations are being swamped with requests to solve the enigma or to start divorce proceedings. A manager of one of the legal aid organizations told the Times that his office is receiving an average of 10 letters a day from wives who have to remain at home these evenings just because their husbands are suffering from crossword puzzleitis. He quoted one letter: "We were happy until recently. Then my husband became absorbed in crossword puzzles. Morning, noon, and night, it's crossword puzzles. It's breaking up our home." The danger wasn't just to married bliss in Cleveland. On December 18, 1925, the Times reported the shocking news that 27-year-old Theodore Corner of Brooklyn had shot his wife Louise with a pistol after she declined to help him with a crossword puzzle. The shot was not immediately fatal, and she ran from the house. When she returned with two New York City detectives, she found her husband was dead, having shot himself through the heart. Exactly what role the crossword puzzles played is unclear, as the paper noted that the unfortunate Mr. Corner had suffered two breakdowns since summer. The family violence was widespread. One Henry Harrison of Brooklyn told the Times in April of 1925, "The statistics hound is again with us. According to the report in the last fiscal year, 583 husbands left their wives because the latter refused to help them with their crossword puzzles. 798 wives deserted their husbands because the men forgot to tell them how they looked in that spring creation, preferring instead to gaze deliberately at the puzzles. And worse," he writes, "675 men were murdered for asking, 'What's a three-letter word for warm?' And 126 children were lost because their mothers were more engrossed in their crossword contraptions than their offspring." His letter at least illustrates the point that satire predates the invention of the internet. But the harm was not merely hyperbolic. On January 6, 1925, the Times reported the shocking news that the preponderance of puzzling was literally clogging the wheels of justice, when Magistrate Earl A. Smith had to order court attendants, policemen, lawyers, and their clients to cease pondering over crossword puzzles when he convened the traffic court. His court attendants were so distracted that when Smith asked a question about one of the cases, the man responded, "Four-letter, meaning elevated," before he glanced up at the magistrate and in the next breath gasped, "Attention, the court." When told that the attendants were solving crossword puzzles, Smith responded, "Tell them to stop at once." The craze particularly affected the case of 28-year-old John Smietanka of Queens, who told the magistrate that crossword puzzles were partly responsible for his failure to return to court several days ago and pay a fine which had been imposed on him. He was sentenced to the workhouse for 10 days. But the violence even reached beyond the courthouse into the jail cell. On December 20th, 1924, the Times reported that cellmates Michael Flood and Michael Grapp in a Pittsburgh jail had hit upon the crossword puzzle as a way to pass the hours in the county jail. But a difference arose of the answer to one of the clues, and today Flood was sentenced to 30 days in the workhouse or a $10 fine for striking his companion. In fact, the worrisome word games were wrecking the very health of the nation. On December 22nd, 1924, the Times reported that the crossword puzzle headache attributed to victims due to eye strain is now sufficiently prevalent that special glasses are being offered by opticians to remedy the trouble. The following January, the Times wrote that W.R. Baker, president of the British Optical Association, drew attention to the prevalence of headaches arising from eye strain caused by crossword puzzles. The problem, he said, had been first identified at a New York eye hospital, which determined that the small type in which clues or keys are printed in some newspapers, and the strain caused by the constant shifting of the eyes from the squares to the clues, have combined to overwork sight. He warned against overindulgence in the pastime. Likewise, athletics was suffering from the craze. On November 18, 1924, the Times reported that Charles D. Lynch, president of the Michigan Association of the Amateur Athletic Union, told a convention of the national organization that crossword puzzles had an adverse effect on the athletes, as they were spending their time poring over the puzzles and were slighting their training. He complained, "They put on their running or bathing suits and then stay in the locker rooms asking each other for words that fill the white spaces on the puzzles." The Times did admit, however, that the puzzles had shown their value in at least one place, the Pennsylvania State Hospital for the Insane, where the Times wrote in December 1924, "Both men and women are said by officers of the institution to have passed hours poring over the black and white squares in newspapers supplied by the hospital." Sadly, though, the Times writes, the new form of diversion had little effect upon the mental welfare of the patients. In March of 1925, the Times editorial board again took on the pernicious puzzles. While opining that for a writer or speaker, no exercise possibly could be worse than working on these puzzles, they expressed a bit of relief. Fortunately, the question of whether the puzzles are beneficial or harmful is in no urgent need of an answer. The craze, evidently, is dying out fast, and in a few months it will have been forgotten.
And the New York Times turned out to be mistaken in that assumption. In 2019, Smithsonian Magazine noted that an estimated 50 million people worldwide do crosswords on a regular basis, writing that by most estimates, more people than ever are solving crossword puzzles, and also noting that crossword puzzles are attracting a newer, younger segment of the population. Now, Smithsonian Magazine didn't use the same five-letter word that the New York Times used in 1924 and 1925. They didn't call the current trend a crossword craze, but they called it crossword fever. And luckily, the fever so far doesn't seem to have interfered with traffic court or marriages in Cleveland. But how did the newspaper that famously said that crossword puzzles have no useful purpose whatsoever become famous for its crossword puzzles? Well, put simply, on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the editors of the New York Times decided that the people of the United States deserved a distraction from the problems of the day and a way to while away the time in what was assumed to be coming blackout hours. On February 15th, 1942, the New York Times published its first crossword puzzle, coming long after every other major metropolitan newspaper in the country had been publishing them. And on September 11th, 1950, the New York Times started publishing a daily crossword. And some 27,000 puzzles later, they still do. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.